Okay, so I'm going to make this pretty quick. I'm going to do just 5 minutes talking about some things that we are doing to support developers and make the whole development workflow that folks are using to build on Tableland just a little bit easier. Um, Let me just. Oh, okay. Let me just share my screen and I'll go through the demo here. Share screen. Screen number 2. Share. All right. So should everybody should be able to see my text editor here? Is that true? Is this the case? Okay. So picture this. Here's your scenario. You're a developer. You're building your next great idea on top of Tableland. And you want to make sure that your SQL statements are going to work and make sense, that they're valid, that they're going to work against the actual Tableland validator in real life. You want to make sure that you can deploy your smart contract and interact with it in a way that makes sense and that's going to interact with the Tableland network. And you want to get that real Tableland network feel while you're developing, but you don't want to deploy a bunch of fake tables to a testnet or something like that. Maybe you don't want to go fetch a bunch of faucet funds so you have your fake internet money to play around with. You just want to do local development like a lot of developers do. So we created a project to help you do just this exact thing, which we're calling Local Tableland. So here's the GitHub repo, Local Tableland. We're sort of soft launching it right now, and we're going to do a little bit more splash and things about it later. But you can imagine this is like your sort of hard hat for Tableland type framework. And one of our core devs, Joe, spent a lot of time tinkering and building and making this as fast and useful as possible. And so he's got some quick start guides here, and he's got some examples of how to actually leverage this in sort of a programmatic sense, so like inside of your development workflow. And so I just want to show you an example of exactly how you can integrate Local Tableland into your local development process and sort of take advantage of all the work that we're doing for our core developers. This is the tool that we use to do a lot of local testing and even testing and stuff in our CI setup. So here I have a very simple template JavaScript or TypeScript project. So it's got pretty much all of the things that you kind of would expect to have, a README, TypeScript config thing, a bunch of stuff for linting, blah, blah, blah. This is the same sort of template that we use in a lot of our front-end libraries. And in this project, we've got sort of very basic, source code. In this case, we just have a function that returns the word world. But we want to start integrating Tableland and the SDK and then testing against a local Tableland instance. So there's just a few things that we have to do to make this possible. One, we need to install, where it is, Tableland/local. So npm install Tableland local. And by the way, this template will be available on GitHub so that you don't need to do these install steps yourselves. The next thing you're going to want to do is start writing your code and including the Tableland SDK. So you're going to install that and start interacting. Then you're going to want to integrate Local Tableland into your testing framework, because I know that everybody writes perfect code and they probably don't need tests, but you might as well throw that in there. It's cool to do test-driven development. So you're going to want to integrate your normal testing framework. I am playing around with Mocha here, but this should work equally well for Jest or Tape or any other testing framework that you're using, assuming that they have a sort of like spin up or run before or setup file that you can use. So we're going to use Mocha, and I'm going to change a few things in my Mocha configuration to make Local Tableland behave a little nicer. The one is I'm going to extend the timeout a little bit. I'm doing this because, hey, we're running against a blockchain here, so things can sometimes take a while to process. And then I'm going to add one more thing here, which is test/setup.typescript, and this is going to be our setup file. This is the only extra step that we're going to need, this setup file, to actually integrate Tableland local into our environment. And so what does that look like? I put it into test/setup. So if we look at that, this is the entirety of the code required to create an instance of local tableland, start it up before my tests run, and then shut it down after my tests run. And when I do this and I run this before I run my tests, I am literally spinning up a local instance of tableland and a local validator that is accepting requests from within my tests and is literally running the smart contract and a local hard hat smart or blockchain process. So I'm really testing, against an actual tableland validator. Now I go ahead and I just write my tests like I normally would. And so I've got a test file here where I test, creating, inserting, updating, and querying data on tableland. But in this case, I'm running it against a local network here. And so as you can see, it's really quite simple to get started and to write tests. We've just got sort of two extra methods or functions that get exported from tableland local to allow me to create a connection or an SDK instance that's connected to the local tableland. So here I call get account, and I get the like a wallet with a private key and all that stuff that you can use to simulate real user interactions. And then I get a connection or an instance of my SDK that is already pre-connected to my local tableland instance. And now I just write my tests or write my code in the way that I would within an app deployed on, Rinkeby or Optimism or wherever I might be interacting. So here I'm, SDK.create a new table with the schema of a counter value that is an integer, and it's going to be called table. And you can, I can do all the testing things that I would normally do. And then I can do things like write and insert into this table. And at the end of the day, when the tests spin down and I'm all done, those things just disappear. And I didn't have to, waste a bunch of gas on a real test net or mainnet while I'm developing. So that's pretty much all you need to do to get this going. And then you can easily integrate it into your we're using GitHub and GitHub Actions to run our CI and CD flow. And here is a test where I actually literally did not need to change anything in order to leverage local tableland within a GitHub Action workflow, because I've just got my test at the bottom, npm test. And since I've integrated this directly with my Mocha testing framework, it'll just work on in GitHub Actions or wherever we are. So very little extra work that is required, and it integrates with the tests that you're writing already. So there you go. That's just one of the many little things that we're working on to support our developers and our developer community. If you're interested in playing around with that, don't hesitate to jump in and start playing around with local tableland. And thank you, Brian. There's some docs about how to use this and play around with it, and you should totally get in there. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is sort of speaking of supporting our developers. We've got more details on this coming out soon, but the sort of sneak peek for everybody who's sitting here listening to me talk about developer tooling is recently the team behind Tableland Textile was awarded a grant from the IPFS community for our participation and our long-term contributions to that ecosystem. And so we won that, and that's exciting. And I'm going to do a blog post and some more about exactly what that means. But the really cool thing for our developers here is we are going to pay that grant forward. And so coming up real soon, again, more announcements to come. We are actually going to take that grant and get some matching funds. It's in Filecoin, but we're going to get some matching funds to give out to developers within our community, so that we can keep that sort of contributions to the ecosystem and to open source pinwheel or flywheel going. So that's an exciting announcement, and you'll get more details on that soon. So if you're a developer who's interested in IPFS, Filecoin, and Tableland and the intersections of those things, keep your ears on high alert for an announcement where we will have some exciting news for you. And that's it from me. Happy developing.